Have you ever wanted to look like an idiot? Maybe get yelled at for something you're not actually doing? I'm pretty good at doing both myself, but if you struggle with it, this right here is the Canon Futura, if that's how you say it. Maybe you're at some sort of theater production where you're allowed to take pictures but not allowed to take videos. Maybe you're at an art gallery where it wouldn't make sense to take videos but it would make sense to take pictures. If you like other people thinking there's something wrong with you, this is a perfect camera for that. You see, this is not a camcorder, even though it looks like one. They say if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and whatever other things ducks do, it's a duck. This is an exception, because this is absolutely in no way, shape, or form a camcorder. I guess form if you think about it. Anyway, this abomination against everything known as pure and true to humanity is the Canon Futura, as I've said earlier. And it was supposed to be the camera of the future. These things came out in 1990, and if you look at history, this was in fact not the camera of the future. Taking a closer look at this, it's pretty easy to tell how it can be confused with a camcorder. It's got the side strap, it's got the same basic shape, and even the button layout could fool you for it. You might start to be clued in that it's not in fact a camcorder, because you have the first half of the word photo sitting right there. It's supposed to be like Futura, Photo, Futura, I don't know. And if you look at the back of it, for the control panel, there is no screen at all, except a tiny little LCD. But that's kind of your first clues that this is a photo camera. Loading the camera is kind of weird. The bottom pops out. And you take a roll of film. In this case, I'm using this Fujifilm that definitely isn't Kodak 200. And I'm honestly not quite sure. I guess it goes in upside down. And you stretch this guy this way. And I'm assuming you close it and it just... Yep, there it goes. Interesting. Yeah, not like my Rebel, which winds itself all the way in and then goes backwards. Another strange feature to point out about this camera is that it has two viewfinders. Got one right here, the usual one, and it's really, really small, like almost uselessly small. And you have another that flips up here, which by the way blocks that one out. This top mount viewfinder I find to be very interesting. The instructions say it's for taking pictures of close things, and that makes sense. But if you don't think this camera makes you look strange enough using it, you can stand 90 degrees to the subject you're photographing, hold the camera like this, and look into it like that. The lens cap acts as an on-off switch for the camera. The features are all disabled as soon as you close this, but the screen still stays on to show how many exposures you've taken along with some other information. If you open it, you can kind of mess around with this thing. This refractor that goes over the flash moves in and out when you zoom the camera. Whether or not this amplifies the beam and creates a spotlight effect, I don't know, but if it does, that's smart. If not, I guess future, I don't know. Feature-wise, this camera's kind of sparse, but it is a point and shoot, so I'll give it that. The flash can be toggled on and off through here, and there's also a slow sync option. The red eye reduction mode comes on automatically when you roll a canister of film into it. Interestingly enough, even though it's kind of a bare bones camera in terms of features, it does have burst shot, and on top of that, if you double press the button for that, you have a feature that is called continuous zoom, but what it does is it automatically zooms in and out on the subject, so you don't have to do it yourself. I can't verify whether or not this works. I'm going to assume it does because this camera doesn't seem like it's had a lot of use, but I can't test it inside of my house right now because it's kind of dark. It's very fun to mess with the zoom and go back and forth and watch the refractor move with the actual lens itself. You also have this button here which looks like a landscape mode, and that's kind of what it is. You hold this down and the shutter button at the same time, and it's supposed to make photos of larger landscapes be more stable. Which is kind of strange because you'd be zoomed all the way out in theory if you're taking pictures of a big landscape. And when you're zoomed all the way out,
Shakiness tends to not show up as much on film in my experience, so I'm really curious as to what that button actually does. The instructions aren't very clear on it, but otherwise they explain a lot of the features pretty well. I wish I knew what it was for though.
The next part of this mess is to take this arthritis-creating machine. Seriously, it really hurts to hold and take pictures like this, so it's probably better to do that. And go out and take some pictures with it. I'm very curious to see how these come out, but I guess I'm going to show them and cut to that.
As you might be able to see, I got my pictures back from the lab. And before we move on anymore, I just want to say this is Fujifilm 200, which is pretty much, everyone theorizes, reboxed Kodak 200 Gold. Somebody looked at the charts for them, and they're completely identical. Like every single metric they compared, they came out the same. Also, the boxes say made in the USA on them, and Fujifilm doesn't have any American factories. You know who does? Kodak. Makes sense. When I was a kid, and I was on vacation in Romania with my family, I always liked to play with disposable cameras. I've been playing with film forever. And one of the things I always tried to do, and every single time it didn't work, was I wanted to take a picture in the mirror with the flash. Every time I did that, the lab, I guess, decided the photo wasn't good enough and just sent them all back except that one. I still haven't lost the desire to do that, and now that I have free will to some extent, I decided to try it, and it works. I don't know what was going on 10, 15 years ago, but it works now, so yeah, there's my little experiment from many years ago. I do like the lens on it, to be honest. I've noticed over time, and a lot of people who may have issues with how they look know this, but depending on the camera, the lens really changes how something looks. You can take the same picture taken with the same camera, just different lenses of the same person, and facial features look completely different. The same thing goes with cars. Some lenses do not make cars look good, but I really like how they look through this. Not all cars are easy to photograph. Certain ones are, but when you take a car like this C6 generation Audi A6, it's a strangely proportioned car. It's really long, it's really bubbly in shape, and being so round, certain lenses make it look weird. My phone can't take a good picture of it. Some other cameras I've tried can't take a good picture of it. But something about this makes it come out right, and I now have the only pictures that I like of this car after trying for almost 2 years, so I'm really loving this camera so far. The instructions say that if you're taking a picture towards anything that lights up, you should use the flash to offset any underexposure issues. And this makes sense. It's an issue with a lot of cameras where it'll expose for the brightest thing in the picture, in this case the light, and everything turns dark around it. If you actually follow the instructions and use the flash, pictures come out fine even pointing at a light source. I pulled an all-nighter before taking all of these photos, and I have trust issues with cameras that are auto much of anything, so I wasn't too optimistic with how these photos were going to come out, but some of them really did come out nice, and I trust the autofocus and everything on this camera. It didn't really ruin a lot of photos. This picture was taken through a fence, and it didn't focus on a fence. I know that's a pretty low bar to go by, but with my experiences with some other cameras, I'm happy with this. I'm really happy with this camera. I know it's a lot more nuanced than that. There's other factors that go into it, but for the most part, I think this is a good camera. Even with some accidental pictures, like this one, it likes to focus on things that are further out. These would have come with a macro lens attachment at one point, but mine is of course missing it. Otherwise, I think I'd be able to focus on things that are closer if I wanted to, but it doesn't work out very well. But it's nice that it doesn't default into some sort of macro mode, because some other cameras that I have really seem to want to do that, even though they don't even come advertised with that kind of feature. Overall, I love this camera, and I had lower expectations for it by a lot. I'm happy with how this thing came out. I thought this was going to be some sort of thing that just sits on my display shelf for the next 10 years, but I think I'm actually going to put quite a bit of use into this thing, just not in public where I look like a creep recording other people. One tiny last thing to say. I say a lot of bad things about this camera at the beginning of the video, and I do that completely sarcastically. I actually really like this camera and think it's interesting. I think a lot of things that are considered fads or, just a gimmick of the time are underrated and misunderstood, and this is one of those things. These things are incredibly cheap on eBay, and if you're wanting to get into film photography, this is something that's super simple to use and would be awesome to get started with. It's a great conversation starter, and it's just cool overall. I really, really love this camera, despite what I said at the beginning of the video. I think it's awesome, and I know people might think, like, oh, you don't understand what it meant at the time. Yeah, I do. I'm just trying to be funny. So, yeah. This marks the end of this video. If you've made it all the way through, thanks. But it's my first time trying anything out like this, where I record it with an older camera to make it look retro. I like how it came out. I put a little bit more effort into this video than my other ones, if you can tell, and I hope this one does well, because I really did put effort into it. If you want to see more of this stuff, I'm going to keep doing it, so subscribe to this channel, and maybe I'll get a better microphone that doesn't pop all the time.